Prepare your goosebumps because America has a new stealth bomber, and it is the coolest aircraft ever made. Flying at an altitude of 50,000 feet, it's invisible to radar, as well as the naked eye. With hundreds under production, this now-built bomber will be the new face of the US Air Force bomber fleet for generations to come. And if it hadn't been built, Northrop Grumman might have to walk away from military aircraft forever. This is the incredible next-generation bomber and the tale behind it, the B-21 Raider.
I produce a lot of aviation content, and this does make me pretty tired, so thanks to Manta Sleep today for helping me get the absolute perfect nap with their amazing sleep masks. Now, the cool thing is about Manta Sleep is that I actually have bought their products well before they came along to partner with me at Phantom Explained.
It actually feels so good.
I can't see anything.
It's like a blindfold. I feel like I'm being taken to one of those CIA interrogation,
I use them on the aeroplanes. They're fantastic when you've got those long-haul flights going internationally overseas, and I genuinely recommend them as the best product on the market. There's a weighted mask that you can use that's a great sleep, if you want like a weighted blanket feel but for your face. There's a cooling mask that's really good when I get migraines or headaches. So if you want to try Manta Sleep, which I really do genuinely recommend, you can get 10% off by using my code down in the description.
Less than a day ago, Northrop Grumman revealed the brand new B-21 Raider. Now, much of this project was known to the press, and thanks to program specifications, rumors, and expert analysis, we have a pretty good picture of what it is. But this is the first time that the aircraft has actually been wheeled out of the hangar and into the public eye. And so some of this video might be slightly off, including any 3D that we have done ahead of time. After all, we couldn't exactly nail this aircraft without seeing it. This is what we know about its performance so far and how it compares to its predecessor, the B-2 Spirit. It will be able to fly up to an altitude of 50,000 feet, the same as the B-2, and potentially up to a higher 70,000 feet, putting it out of reach of most other aircraft. But unlike the B-2, it has a much lower armament, being half the size and carrying only around 30,000 pounds of weaponry. The reason for this was to go the quantity route rather than the quality, which will make a ton more sense later in the video when we talk about how this amazing aircraft was built. Interestingly, during the procurement phase, it was recommended that this bomber be a UAV and piloted remotely. But as it has a nuclear mission, generals were reluctant to take pressing the button out of human hands. Now, fascinatingly, the real-life version that was revealed was actually painted white. Or so what we're led to believe. It might be paint, or perhaps a state-of-the-art camouflage material that is next-generation stealth coating for military aircraft, like we saw with the Chrome Raptor. Plus, there are no visible seams on the aircraft shown in the unveiling ceremony, possibly suggesting a new advanced material that allows sensors, communication antennas, and air data systems to be built directly into the airframe. This stealth bomber also has a fully digital platform, meaning all the components can be swapped out and upgraded at any time. No decade refurbishments or advancements, but simple updates that are added now and again. We also didn't see the back of the plane, so the propulsion is practically unknown at this point. Whilst it's very strongly hinted that it has two engines fed by the two dorsal intakes, it's not out of the question that there are actually 4 engines on board. Again, everything about this jet is classified. Now, you're probably wondering, Nick, why on earth is the US military even showing the world this new aircraft if it's supposed to be a classified stealth bomber? Well, it's because of the new START treaty signed with Russia. If a new nuclear-capable strategic bomber enters the game, disclosure is needed. In fact, Russia could even demand to see the plane at the base under the rules. And so if we're telling all to Russia, we might as well let the public know too. Although we can't rule out that it's a great opportunity as well for America to roll out some badass new plane and show the world that they're still mighty and kicking. And the best part is, this jet is cheap. At $692 million US per plane, it's the cheapest new bomber for America in a long time, and employing well over 5,000 new engineers to build the 100-strong fleet at Northrop Grumman. It's a fantastic push for the world of aviation. So how did we get here? Let's deep dive and recap the incredible journey of the B-21. In mid-2009, the US government realized that it had a serious problem with its bomber fleet. So far, they had the indispensable 50-year-old B-52 for ground pounding, the B-1 Lancer for quick strikes, and the B-2 Spirit for stealth attacks. The issue was, the B-2 Spirit was supposed to be the replacement of the B-1, as well as the B-52, but it was far too expensive. Coming at the cost of $2 billion each, only 1/6 of the fleet of 132 aircraft were ever built. This bomber gap meant that by 2037 there would be a huge shortfall in capacity and capability of the US Air Force as these aircraft were retired. The military thus had two paths forward: restart the awfully expensive B-2 fleet or build a brand new aircraft. The Air Force decided that both a manned and unmanned long-range strike bomber would be required going forward, and that could perform intelligence gathering, surveillance and reconnaissance, as well as sending an arsenal of freedom anywhere in the world. But it would also have the strict requirements that this new aircraft be affordable enough to produce in the numbers to replace the aging, older bomber fleet, and to be made out of existing technology so it could be created as quickly as possible. But getting the funding for this aircraft would prove to be much harder than initially thought. To beat the upcoming bomber gap and build a new fleet of 100 aircraft, timing was of the essence, and the US Air Force needed a ton of money fast.
We've got to have money.
In 2012, the Obama administration planned an expenditure of $3.7 billion for this next-generation bomber project, but politics being politics, it was stonewalled as too expensive and that there wasn't an urgent threat for this aircraft. To overcome this, the US Air Force looked at ways to cut down the costs of the program. Components such as engines and radars could be bought off the shelf or simply taken from the existing F-35 program. They also did something rather clever. The Air Force asked for far more resources than needed, approximately $292 million in 2011, so when the eventual budget cuts came, the bomber could continue. Finally, in August of 2013, the project got its allocation thanks to a reduced program requirements and difficulties in the F-22 Raptor program, showcasing an ability gap in the current Air Force. But believe it or not, it was the rise of China that finally got the budget on the table. Experts believe that China would overcome the stealth of the B-2 bomber by the year 2020, and stealth was America's pride and joy. And as the B-21 was a stealth bomber, it would be given all the money required to keep that edge against the Asian rival. With the funding sorted, it came down to selecting someone to build it, and it was time for our usual suspects to step forward.
Why is it, when something happens, it is always you three?
The year is 2014 and the heat is on between two rival bids to build this bomber. In one corner, we have Boeing and Lockheed Martin, who decided to team up with the former, bringing bomber experience, and the latter with their stealth technology. And in the other corner was Northrop Grumman, who was still riding on the success of the B-2 Spirit. Now, this was a bigger deal than you might think. With fewer Air Force projects going forward and bigger gaps between contracts, whoever lost this program might have to shut down their military production lines forever. What's fascinating at this point is that there were actually two proposals for this bomber, but as it is all top secret, we only have rumors to what the Boeing-Lockheed proposal actually was. This concept was believed to be a much longer delta wing shape with an extended nose like the SR-71. It would have two dorsal fin engines on top, and it would have a similar capacity and range as the Northrop concept. Boeing & Co. got as far as flying a smaller demonstrator in Texas of 2014, adding much to the rumors of UFOs in that area. Again, this could be completely wrong, and I'll likely remake this video in 50 years once the real story is finally released. On the other hand, Northrop would turn in a little project that they were working on called the 2025 passenger cargo concept. Looking at the initial reports, you can clearly see the similarity to the B-2 and to the eventual B-21. Clearly, Boeing and Lockheed had the capacity and experience to build this craft, and they even saw themselves as the safer choice. So why did they lose the contract? Well, it turns out that Boeing bit the hand that feeds them with a little known story called the Boeing Next Gen Tanker. Long story short, Boeing's mishandlement of the refuel fleet and embarrassment in failing to meet the deadlines made the Department of Defense cautious to even consider them. It's from here that our story goes quiet and very little was hinted at. The Air Force would release several renderings of the B-21 leading up to the eventual reveal that showed it as a smaller, more flexible B-2 bomber. After all, it makes sense. It's supposed to be cheaper, deliver nuclear weapons, fit into normal hangars, and utilize existing technology. And with the B-2 being the last advanced bomber, it just makes sense that Northrop Grumman, who built it, won the award. And there you have it. America has a new bomber fleet on the way, one that is far under the existing cost of previous generations and will keep the US freedom delivering for many years to come. Oh, and if you're waiting for a shot of it taking off into the sky, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until next year. What do you think? Does the bomber look like the aircraft you're expected to see? Let us know down in the comments. And thanks for watching. This video is sponsored by me. Check out my new channel, Aviation Station, right here. Traveling over our heads at hypersonic speeds beyond Mach 7 lies the future of spy plane technology. This plane can be anywhere in the world in 1 hour, enter any country unnoticed, and be out before their jets can even get into the sky. This future plane doesn't need a pilot, flies twice as fast as the SR-71 Blackbird, and further development has rumored that it will have equipped hypersonic missiles. And perhaps the most shocking thing about this top secret project is, it could be flying today. This is the son of the Blackbird, the mysterious SR-72. Spy planes have always filled an important role in intelligence gathering. At the start, they were the only way to get a bird's eye view on what was going on over others' borders. And then even then, when satellites became more feasible and technologically advanced, they still had other advantages. They're fast, can be deployed much quicker than orbital cameras, and can avoid being shot down. The SR-71 Blackbird is commonly known as the most famous spy plane, and during its operation, one of the fastest US aircraft in the Air Force. But with the retirement of this older spy plane in 1998, the USA government was left with a bit of a problem. There was now a gap in their ability to spy between spy satellites and slower remote drones. With other nations developing anti-satellite weapons and area denial technologies, as well as good old-fashioned fast jets to intercept normal planes, the USA needed a new spy plane. But this new plane would have to be fast. So fast that it would be able to enter protected airspace, observe and take photos, and perhaps even strike a target well before enemies could detect and intercept it, something that is currently unavailable from 5th generation fighter jets or any known space programs. Enter the new version of the SR-71 called the Son of the Blackbird. This is what the top secret project is all about. Work on this project was announced to be started way back in 2007, although likely engineers at the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works started research development many years earlier. Initial rumours were that they were working on a new aircraft that could fly up to Mach 6, or 4,000 miles per hour, or 6,400 kilometers per hour. Boy, that is fast. At an altitude of 80,000 feet, or 24,000 meters, triple the height of Mount Everest. This means this plane could reach anywhere in the world in only 1 hour. To achieve this insane speed, Lockheed is developing a special hybrid jet and rocket engine. In layman's terms, a typical military aircraft would use a turbojet engine to get an aircraft up to a speed of Mach 2.2. Higher than that speed, it's more effective to use a ramjet, up to around about Mach 6. To get over the Mach 6 barrier, air quotes, this requires a new engine design called a scramjet. The challenge is, of course, to create an engine that can perform well at all 3 speeds. The SR-72 is believed to fix this by having both a turbine engine for low speeds and then converting into a scramjet for higher speeds. Both engines will have the same inlet and exhaust, but different airflows inside of the aircraft. Lockheed is working with Aerojet Rocketdyne to develop this engine called the turbine-based combined cycle propulsion system and has had millions of dollars in funding from NASA. But flying at this speed comes with plenty of challenges. The aircraft would also need to be able to survive flying at such high speeds with aerodynamic heating causing massive gains in surface temperature, hot enough to melt conventional aircraft materials. Thus, this plane will need to be built from a special fabrication of metal and ceramic composites, much like those used in the space shuttle. But constructing this is also the other challenge. Much of this work will need to employ 3D printing, allowing greater fabrication and technologies unrealizable before, even as soon as 5 years ago. One such example of using this technology will be 3D printing the cooling system directly inside of the engine. Whilst this might all sound like science fiction, much of this research is actually based on the already flown Hypersonic Technology Vehicle 2, or HTV-2, that was developed in 2010 for the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA. It managed to fly up to Mach 20 for 9 minutes, which is around 13,000 miles per hour. Unfortunately, the drone actually lost control and the autopilot activated its self-destruct protocol and dived directly into the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But DARPA believes that they have enough research from this project to use it in the SR-72 program and has since cancelled a scheduled third test Mach 320 UAV. Of course, this future version of the SR-72 might not just be used for intelligence gathering and reconnaissance, but deploying weapons as well. Looking at the plane's specs, it might make sense that any design should be built with the ability to strike targets using special hypersonic missiles. Hypersonic aircraft coupled with hypersonic missiles could penetrate denied airspace and strike at nearly any location across a continent in less than an hour, said Brad Leland, Lockheed Martin program manager. Speed is the next aviation advancement to counter emerging threats in the next several decades. The technology would be a game changer in theatre, similar to how stealth is changing the battle space today. Of course, many people are already starting to write in the comments that there isn't such a weapon technology today. The problem is not only would you need to design a missile that could survive the air friction traveling at that speed, but it would also need to be flexible enough to be used. For example, how would this missile turn whilst in flight? Its turning circle would be hundreds of miles wide and it would burn through plenty of fuel. Thus, not only will the SR-72 require plenty of development, but its weapons will require all new technologies as well. but there are other advantages of this design that are actually removing many of the weaknesses of the SR-71. With modern technology, engineers can revisit the mission design of the Blackbird and remove some of the flaws that were put in place thanks to the 1970s technology, like the space shuttle-like countdown for launch, or that the fact that the SR-71 took more than a week to turn around for a second flight. And as well as remove the need for pilots. The SR-72 will have the option of having pilots on board, but it will also be able to fly remotely. Without having any human meat sacks, the plane will be able to perform much greater acceleration and tighter turns with more G-forces, removing the last of the aircraft's great weaknesses. Overall, Lockheed is confident that this conceptual SR-72 hypersonic plane will be able to reach Mach 6, cost only $1 billion, and be flying by 2025. But you might have noticed that throughout this video, I have said future or under development. But if this aircraft is following anything like the development of the original SR-71 development, then it's already flying today. Now, this is where things get a little bit fuzzy, and I hope that you understand that at this point in time, there's a lot of unknowns and also a lot of conspiracy theories to filter through. The original timeline for this project was that the construction would begin in 2018 and that the prototype would fly somewhere in 2025 and then enter active military service by 2030. But here's the funny thing, generally the US military is years ahead of what we know. We know that there are rumors of several other spy planes in active service, of various prototyping stages such as the Aurora or those mysterious black triangles. And who's to say that the SR-72, or at least a flying prototype version, is not already in active service, or at least in the active prototype stages, flying somewhere among the desert sands of the US continent. The question is, do you really think that the US government would have left its spy plane defense or offensive role unfilled for the last 20 years after the retirement of the SR-71? Well, I'll let you decide down in the comments below. As for where we are today with the SR-72 progress, so far the US Air Force is still kind of deciding between the SR-72 and the Northrop RQ-180 drone, which is already flown and has greater stealth capabilities, although it's not a hypersonic aircraft and thus built with conventional technologies that are far easier to realize. Lockheed has a way to go developing the prototype and its underlying technologies of the SR-72. Although in 2017, Executive Vice President Rob West commented that we've been saying hypersonics are 2 years away for the last 20 years, but all I can say is that the technology is mature and we, along with DARPA and the other services, are working hard to get that capability into the hands of our warfighters as soon as possible. It remains to be seen which project will be put into service or which will ever be publicly acknowledged. If you want to know more about the Blackbird SR-1 development, I highly suggest you check out Scott's Aerospace Projects Review's new book all about it. He has accurate diagrams and massive amount of never discussed information from people who have worked on the project. I'll chuck a link down in the description. And if you want to see more content in the world of aviation, you can check out my new channel here, Aviation Station, where I'll be doing more videos on all things aviation, from reviews to industry news, as well as having some much more casual conversation. And special thanks to my Patreons who have supported me on this journey, and all of my fans that have subscribed. And if you haven't subscribed, and you keep seeing my videos appear again and again on your YouTube homepage, then now is the time I suggest you jump on board to see much more. Thank you so much for watching. For years, the US has been very dominant in the air with its battle-proven fighters like the F-15, F-16, and F-18, along with the King of the Skies, and for a long time, the only fifth-generation fighter in service, the F-22. F-22. There simply wasn't a serious answer to the US 5th generation of fighter jets from any other competitor on the market up until recent years. Now, after the troublesome development of the F-35 fighter, the US is looking to move above and beyond the competition, and by that I mean completely new generation of fighters. Meet the next generation of air dominance, the jet fighter of the future. Before hopping all the way to the 6th generation, let's have a look back at history and how the US classified the first 4 generations of fighter jets. The first generation was jet propulsion. It was the breakthrough technology that essentially defined what would become known as a fighter jet in the first place. The second generation was defined by swept wings, range-finding radar, and infrared-guided missiles. For the third generation, it was all about supersonic flight, pulse radar, and missiles that could engage opponents beyond visual range. The fourth generation is famous for the introduction of multi-role jets, implementing fly-by-wire controls, and the focus of BVR air-to-air combat and agility. Further post-Cold War development created the so-called 4+, or as some like to call it, the 4++ generation, which is focused on reduced radar signature, true multi-role capabilities, along with advanced avionics, and weapon systems like on board the Rafale, the Eurofighter, or the Russian Su-35S. The US became the first country to introduce an operational 5th generation fighter, where it did so with the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor in 2005. There was one thing that set the 5th generation of fighter jet apart from the 4th generation: stealth. That's why stealth capabilities are central to the design philosophy of the F-22 Raptor. These aircraft prioritize stealth from day one, that is, from the conceptual design phase, rather than seeking ways to reduce radar signature after they had designed the whole plane in the shop. The result was a multi-role fighter that would be able to do hit-and-run missions behind enemy lines, and with either no or minimal losses, completing its mission goals, striking critical enemy targets in either air or on the ground. These fighter jets also included active electronic scanning array radars and engines that are powerful enough to cruise above the speed of sound without the need of afterburners. The downside of 5th generation aircraft, however, is although they're able to carry weapons and fuel externally should their need arise, that doing that will instantly make them less stealthy. And without full-on stealth capabilities, the aircraft could literally be considered more sleek-looking versions of 4th generation jets, and that's a major letdown. As already stated, a 6th generation or class of fighter jets beyond the 5th was inevitable. There is an understanding that aerial combat of the future will have less of an emphasis on one-to-one dogfights or even brute aerial superiority. Rather, the focus and role of the new jet would be a part of an integrated system of manned and unmanned aircraft, ground troops, satellites, or AWACS planes, depending on the nature of the task at hand. The idea behind the integration of manned and unmanned aircraft is that there would be only one pilot operating 2 or more aircraft at a time. UAVs would not be controlled from the ground, and the AI would be able to perform basic tasks commanded by the pilot, allowing the pilot to focus on the priority objectives, with the drones either providing recon, support, or drawing enemy fire away. These roles would allow our hero pilot to slip in unnoticed, or at least face smaller and softer threats whilst performing their missions. One of these drones could be the XQ-58 Valkyrie, or the Loyal Wingman, that we've previously covered on the channel and that you can watch right here. Integral to this digital sophistication will be the use of virtual cockpits. With these, pilots will view their control panels via helmet-mounted displays, or HMDs, which will afford the pilot 360-degree vision with AI-enhanced battlefield awareness, technology already being implemented in the F-35. They might also implement some of the technology currently in development, like airborne high-energy beam weapons, or simply called lasers. And no, this is not a joke or some sci-fi babble that I'm using to try and get views, because the airborne laser platforms have been developed ever since the Cold War, with the best examples being the Soviet Beriev A-60 and the US Boeing YAL-1. More on them on a future video, so click that subscribe button. Implementation of these weapons could be either for the protection of the aircraft or for tactical purposes such as blinding enemy sensors, satellites, and more. Apart from all of those, the multi-role 6th Gen fighter will still have to tick all the boxes defined by the previous generation, like stealth capability, supersonic speed without afterburners, and the ability to strike multiple targets at a time. So what will actually be the 6th generation jet? The US Navy launched a 6th generation F/A-XX program back in 2008, with the Air Force following up with its own next generational tactical aircraft in 2010. It was the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, that was designated to lead the development of these next generation aircraft. They decided in 2013 that both of these concepts need to be brought together, even if this approach was actually criticized by some of the analysts. By 2015, the Air Force and Navy requirements were formally integrated, and a joint focus on AI systems and a common airframe. The plan by the Air Force was the development and acquisition of a 6th generation fighter jet through its Penetrative Counteract, or PCA program, that replaced existing fighters such as the Boeing F-15 platforms and the Lockheed Martin F-22 Raptor. The initial goal was this jet to take to the sky by the 2030s, although we now consider that a rather optimistic deadline. The plan is that the NGAD aircraft will join just 3 other fighter jets to comprise the US Air Force and United States Navy Air Fleet, specifically the Lockheed Martin F-35, the Boeing FA-18 Super Hornet, and the Boeing F-15E, as well as I should mention its further development variant, the F-15EX. This will actually see the demise of the F-22 Raptor, the most capable fighter of the Air Force, although a problematic and expensive one. As of the end of 2021, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop have all announced 6th generation aircraft development projects of their own, so the race is on to get this into the sky. Military analysts were taken by surprise when Dr. Will Roper, the acquisition executive for the US Air Force, announced in September 2020 that the Air Force had already flown a full-scale flight demonstrator as part of its program. Experts were genuinely surprised, given that funding for the project had only been granted by Congress in 2018, which meant that the program was advancing at an unusually fast pace for a fighter jet concept. But this makes sense when you examine the project in a little bit more detail. An important feature of the program is the way in which it's project managed. Unlike other previous fighter jet projects, many of which went wildly over budget and took many additional years to complete, this time it was decided that there would be a split between design, production, and sustainment. This meant that whatever company designs the aircraft will not be awarded the production contract, whilst the production company, in turn, will not get the contract to maintain the aircraft once it's in active service. The focus is instead on high-tech manufacturing centers capable of producing anything produced in digital format, rather than having a dedicated and very expensive aircraft factory. It's also supposed to minimize the chances of one company screwing up the entire project. It's also worth noting that Dr. Will Roper was rather cagey about the project when he made this announcement back in September 2020. For example, Roper declined to comment on how many of these prototype aircraft had been flown or which defense contractors had even been involved in the project. He also refused to say when the first flight occurred, and perhaps in the most galling aspect of this announcement, he refused to divulge even a single aspect of the aircraft's design, not to mention the aircraft's principal mission or whether it would be manned or optionally manned. Roper wouldn't even confirm whether or not the prototype could fly at hypersonic speeds or if it had better stealth capabilities. According to Roper, all of these characteristics were frankly, in his opinion, beside the point. The bottom line is we still actually don't know much about this project and what is concrete or verifiable. What we do know is that several other countries have 6th generational aircraft programs on the go or in the pipeline, with the most prominent ones being the Japanese Mitsubishi FX, the British BAE Tempest, and jointly developed European Future Combat Air System. There are also other aircraft in development which may or may not be true 6th gen aircraft, creating maybe another plus generation, finding itself between 5 and 6. So the United States may yet find itself with some stiff competition from allies and foes alike with its 6th generation fighter jet design. But I like to think that it may yet be the most furious generation of fighter jets ever seen. And speaking of seeing things early, if you want to see these videos early on Found and Explained, then I suggest you become either a channel member or a Patreon supporter. You not only get to see the videos early, chat with me directly, but also suggest your own ideas in our Discord server. So I hope to see you there and can't wait to see you in the next video.
Oh, that's nice. I like that so much. Okay, now begins the 12-hour time lapse of me having a sleep.
Like the leap from propeller to jet, the next great step is upon us in military aviation, and this one is a little more terrifying. After all, it's replacing the pilot with silicon. Introducing the Loyal Wingman, the next generation of military aircraft that is going to literally take the man out of the pilot seat. New drones like the Turkish Bayraktar have literally changed the tide of war, and their role in the future cannot be ignored. The technology is quickly reaching the point where it's more effective to operate a fleet of droned aircraft than meat-based fighter pilots. But does this herald a golden age, or are we simply setting ourselves up for real-life Terminator? Let's jump into it. Drones go back farther in time than you might realize. The first military drone-like object were the balloon bombs that Field Marshal von Radetzky of Austria used to attack Venice. Rather unsuccessfully, I might add, in 1849. Some very famous people have been associated with early drone technology as well. For example, Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite, launched a rocket with a camera on it in 1896, which is believed to be the first time that cameras were placed on an unmanned object. And then in 1898, the inventor, Nikola Tesla, yes, that Tesla, displayed a remote-controlled boat at Madison Square Garden in New York City. The crowds present at the time thought that Tesla was a magician, or that a trained monkey was operating the craft. Tesla's flying boat was the precursor to remote control aircraft, which in turn were the daddies of drones as we know them today. It was the British that invented a low-cost radio-controlled drone in 1935, which was developed for aerial target practice by the Royal Air Force pilots. It was called the de Havilland DH-82B Queen Bee aircraft, which is where the nickname drones comes from and is considered the first modern drone. The technology for drones, or unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs as they're now technically known, has grown enormously in recent years. Their capabilities have become increasingly sophisticated. Importantly, drones are being developed to be used in lockstep with manned aircraft such as jet fighters. This emerging class of super smart drones are known as the Loyal Wingman, are already being tested, and their role with 6th generation fighter jets is of particular interest. So what exactly makes drones so darn fantastic? Over time, UAVs or drones have evolved to include missions such as manned and unmanned teaming, aerial refueling, electronic warfare, and other modes of military-related functionality. In fact, just recently, the US performed the first mid-air refueling with a drone aircraft, breaking ground in the class's utility. UAVs come in all sizes, ranging from hard-launched line-of-sight craft weighing less than 6.5 pounds or 3 kilograms to huge drones with high-altitude, long-endurance surveillance strike capabilities. A recent report stated that over 5,000 drone aircraft will be built by the year 2027 in over 101 countries as part of their military operations. So far, there are around 50 or so development programs, but only a handful of nations have seen, air quotes, killer results. Top players include the world's military powers, such as the USA, China, Russia, EU, Israel, and the UK. But a surprising entry is also Australia, which we'll get to in a moment. The black horse of the race to build military drones is Turkey, who deployed its new TB2 Bayraktar very well in a recent conflict in the region. Some of the greatest benefits of drones with cutting-edge technologies are their formidable dexterity and capabilities in the air, with an always improving ability to track multiple opponents simultaneously, as well as provide excellent backup and reconnaissance of manned aircraft, including latest generation fighter jets. For example, absorbing enemy fire during live combat will be a further standout feature of the Loyal Wingman drones. We can't help but mention that the clear advantage of drones is that the pilot is still alive if anything happens. It can take up to 5 years to train a pilot and a further 5 to get them up to speed on the ever-evolving technology, only to lose them in a single day. For many militaries, they suffer from a lack of skilled pilots, not a lack of planes. Drones are cheaper to use, quicker to deploy, and have no lifetime limit. Oh, and by the way, the Defensive Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, yes, the same folks that mostly invented the internet, ran simulated engagements between AI and fighter pilots in 2020. To put it mildly, the AI pilot trounced the human pilot. If the tests had been a tennis match, the AI would have won 6-0. So why is development of these new drones speeding up? The Loyal Wingman programs have been so popular with the military because of the rapidness in which the drones can get developed. It's well known that the development process entailed with manned aircraft, especially fighter jets, is notoriously slow and cumbersome. And the process seems to be getting even more protracted. A lot of this time lag with developing manned fighter jets is due to the relentless safety testing that needs to be done so the jets can be flown with confidence by pilots. Not so in the case for unmanned craft such as the Loyal Wingman. These pilot-related mandatory safety features are not the issue for these drones. They are considered more expendable during testing in what the military terms as attrition. As such, the development turnaround times for Loyal Wingman models have tended to be phenomenally quick by comparison. For example, the Kratos XQ-58 Valkyrie drone first flew in 2019, a mere 2.5 years after the contract was granted. Boeing's drone, known by the decidedly less sexy name of the Air Power Teaming System, or ATS, took just 2 years between mock-up in 2019 and first test flight in 2021. But there are some experts who believe that the Loyal Wingman would be better suited to what would be termed non-lethal force multipliers, working alongside the US Air Force fleet of manned aircraft. Nevertheless, the focus by the military is to make the Loyal Wingman drone class as combat ready as possible, particularly for upcoming 6th generation fighter jets. More on that later. So let's talk about the Boeing Wingman. The Boeing ATS, also referred to as the Loyal Wingman, is the epitome of a modern UAV, which means it's all about stealth and being multifunctional. Importantly, it serves the role of what is known as a force multiplier aircraft that can fly alongside manned planes. It can also be used for autonomous missions. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is integral to the central design philosophy and various capabilities of Boeing's Loyal Wingman. A key technical feature of this military drone is its modular mission package system, whereby its AI is located in its nose. The craft's nose can be quickly and easily removed and replaced with another nose having a completely different set of equipment or armament guidance systems. This means the Loyal Wingman can be quickly deployed for a variety of different and very specific missions, which can include combat, reconnaissance, and most specifically to this class of UAV, electronic warfare. The nose, by the way, is 2.5 meters or 8.2 feet long and offers a storage volume of more than 1.5 meters or 5 feet cubed. But what weapons will it carry? Sorry to disappoint, but so far Boeing has been tight-lipped, leaving us only to speculate. Furthermore, another plus is that the fuselage is made of composite materials that use an advanced resin infusion process, which results in a lighter and more durable craft. The drone has an integrated onboard sensor package that should more than ably support its 3 core functions, namely intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, or ISR, as well as tactical early warning missions. Besides allowing the drone to fly independently or support a manned aircraft it accompanies, its inbuilt AI also ensures that it maintains a safe distance between itself and other aircraft at all times. The specifications of the Loyal Wingman include the following: crew, none. Well, that should be obvious. Its length from tail end to nose tip is 11.7 meters or 38 feet and 5 inches, and it has a wingspan of 7.31 meters or 24 feet across. Lastly, its range is 3,700 kilometers or 2,000 nautical miles. Boeing claims that its Loyal Wingman will ultimately have a performance capable to that of a conventional fighter jet. In the words of Boeing, it will provide fighter-like performance. So why am I so excited about this aircraft in particular? Because of the Australian connection. A unique aspect about the Boeing's ATS or Loyal Wingman is that it's to be manufactured in my native Australia. Yep, the Boeing ATS or Loyal Wingman is gonna have a dash of good old Aussie flair. One of its roles in Australia will be to support the manned Royal Australian Air Force or the RAAF aircraft for both defence and surveillance purposes. These include the F-35A, the FA-18F, and the E-78 aircraft. More than 35 Australian companies are to be involved in the production of Boeing's Loyal Wingman, including Boeing Australia, BAE Systems Australia, RUAG Australia, and Ferrara Engineering. It would also be the first time in more than 50 years that a fighter jet is to be made in Australia, so this is a big deal for the country. And that it has shown its commitment to the project, with the Australian Royal Air Force ordering a total of 6 Loyal Wingman drones worth $115 million. And this aircraft was built fast. A full-scale mock-up of the Boeing ATS was first revealed at the 2019 Avalon Air Show. Boeing Australia then released images of a detailed prototype of the aircraft only a few months later in May 2020, with an accompanying video highlighting the drone's various operational capabilities. Testing for the Loyal Wingman then happened at a rapid rate. Boeing announced its first powered-up drone engine in September 2020, following on low-speed taxi tests only a few weeks later. It then performed a high-speed taxi test at a remote location in the middle of the desert in December 2020, which we all know is the top-secret Australian Area 51 that they don't want you to know about. These series of ground tests were used to validate the drone's navigation and pilot control systems. The all-important first flight test of the Loyal Wingman prototype took place on February 27, 2021 at the Woomera Range Complex located in South Australia. For the test, the drone completed a predetermined route at different speeds and altitudes before safely landing back at the base. It's reported that the drone was also able to successfully stop on command, so the functionality and integration of the drone systems, such as steering, brakes, and engine controls, could be checked. This first test run was considered a considerable and positive step forward by Boeing and the Royal Australian Air Force alike. Shane Arnott, Boeing's ATS program director, explained exactly how the Loyal Wingman works. Most of the interaction by the human is really in the mission planning. The test pilot was in the loop throughout. He gave commands at each phase, if you will, taxi, takeoff and return, and it's almost as simple as that. He further added that the drone's AI capabilities were not a priority during these initial tests. So what's the next step from here for all this crazy new drone technology? The Loyal Wingman class of drones, whether Boeing's ATS or the Valkyrie UAV being developed by Kratos, have particular significance for the 6th generation of jet fighters that are already in development. These next-age fighter jets could benefit greatly from UAVs aiding them in close proximity, in what is conceptually referred to as a manned-unmanned teaming, or MUM-T. The AI and machine learning embedded in the Loyal Wingman drones will greatly enhance the capability of manned fighter jets, being able to control them, especially considering that 6th generation fighter jets will also have their own sophisticated AI on board. Analysts believe that the flight lead or manned jet in control could command multiple UAVs to conduct their own autonomous missions while still under the control of the lead manned aircraft. These multiple drones, or drone swarms, could pack a powerful punch in aerial combat, reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. This is all testament to what the Australian Strategic Policy Institute saw as clear evidence that the 4th industrial revolution in defence capability has arrived, and it most certainly has. So far I've been upbeat and positive, but are there any flaws with this new technology? There is no Loyal Wingman yet in active service, and their reliability continues to be in question. Also, aircrew are notoriously skeptical of any unmanned aircraft which they have to work with, and the Loyal Wingman is an unpiloted machine. And it's that fact about machines that we need to discuss. In popular culture, machines have long been untrustworthy, especially when they're given the capability to kill. We only need to look at the movie Stealth in 2005, which is about an AI pilot that almost starts a war with North Korea, or perhaps Call of Duty that shows what happens when a drone army falls into the wrong hands. Even futurologists like Elon Musk is afraid of the technology, saying, "Robots will be able to do everything better than us. I have exposure to some of the most cutting-edge AI, and I think people should be really concerned by it." But this UAV technology has already arrived, and its inclusion in air surveillance and scouting, air combat and other operations is inevitable. We have already seen the MQ Reaper drones in action, and tests have shown them very effective with air-to-air missiles. A fact that Turkish drones like the Bayraktar literally changed the tide of war in Libya and the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, flying above the battle zone, drawing fire and revealing enemy positions. Furthermore, the technology of the Loyal Wingman and its ilk will not be slow and lumbering like any other aircraft in the military. Not a chance. Rather, the evolution of the Loyal Wingman will be like that of the smartphone, fast and furious. And if you want to be fast and furious just like me, then jump onto Patreon or become a channel member to support Found and Explained. With your membership, you get access to videos early, helping choose topics, and even get to talk to me direct on the Discord. So jump on and check it out, and thanks so much for watching. What would America's future Air Force look like in the next 20 years? What insane new aircraft would they be deploying, and what new jets would they fly, and what cutting-edge technology is right around the corner? Today we're talking fighters, helicopters, drones, and super-secret stealth bombers that will be all over America's skies in the year 2040. Starting off this list in the coolest possible way is the next generation air dominance fighter. This thing is a beast, and believe it or not, it may have already flown. Gone is the tail, and introduces an even more advanced weapon system, stealth capabilities, and highly advanced artificial intelligence. Now, it's rumored that this prototype of this aircraft has already been flown, with the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Will Roper, stating that a full-scale prototype was tested in the skies above the deserts of Nevada back in 2020. Maybe that's why they wanted us all to stay isolated and at home. When the testing is complete and awarded, this jet will be built either by Lockheed Martin or Boeing, with a possible order of 200 jets to replace the F-22 Raptor. Yes, you heard me right. What may surprise you is that the future domestic defender of the US airspace isn't the F-22 Raptor, originally built to go toe-to-toe against anything that the rest of the world has. But as it turns out, this was totally overkill and pretty much an expensive blunder, especially with many of America's foes are insurgents living in caves. Rather, the US Air Force is looking backward towards the F-15 to expand its role as the F-15EX with modern technology, avionics, and weapons. This aircraft will quickly fill any gaps in the homeland's defense and be a masterstroke in weapon sales around the world. Cha-ching! But no Air Force is complete without bombers, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Introducing the Northrop Grumman B-21 Raider. This long-range strike bomber is designed to serve as a stealthy, long-range intercontinental strategical bomber capable of delivering both conventional and thermonuclear munitions. The primary objective of the B-21 is to replace the Rockwell B-1 Lancer and the Northrop Grumman B-2 Spirit in the US Air Force's arsenal by the year 2040, with the potential to phase out even the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress thereafter, with a first flight slated for 2027. And you bet this is also for sale for America's allies around the world, with my home country Australia most recently just passing on it. Damn, choosing instead to focus on drone warfare. That's right, my kangaroo brothers in arms are doubling down on highly autonomous fighters, specifically the MQ-28 Ghostbat. Built in partnership with Boeing, the Ghostbat boasts a versatile modular mission package system enabling seamless adaptation to diverse sensor and weapon configurations tailored to its specific mission requirements. It can cover distances of up to 2,000 nautical miles whilst attaining speeds of up to Mach 0.95. Operating either autonomously or in conjunction with other Ghostbats or manned aircraft, it demonstrates remarkable flexibility. We can expect by 2040 the American Air Force to have countless drone aircraft that follow their fighter aircraft hosts into combat, quickly doubling the numbers on the front line to overwhelm the enemy without any threats and without loss of life. Well, American loss of life, so to speak. And as for my little Australia, we are going to start with a humble 6. But that's not all. America also plans to replace other famous aircraft in their team, like the iconic Black Hawk. Yes, it looks like it's time for this old bird to be retired by something that looks incredibly different and honestly kinda sick. Meet the Bell V-280. This is a tilt-rotor aircraft that can carry up to 14 troops with 4 crew, and it can fly up to 280 knots per hour, hence the name the V-280. It also has an impressive range that can eliminate forward air bases in operational areas. For example, only needing one airport to reach all of Afghanistan. Now that's damn impressive. In one major difference from the early V-22 Osprey tilt rotor, the engines remain in place while the rotors and drive shafts tilt. A drive shaft runs through the straight wing, allowing both the prop rotors to be driven by a single engine in the event of engine loss. The V-280 will also have a retractable landing gear, a triple redundant fly-by-wire control system, and a V-tail configuration. What's even more insane is that this is not just going to be a transport helicopter, but also an attack version as well.
Bell and Lockheed claim that the AV-280 variant can launch rockets, missiles, and even small unmanned aerial vehicles forward or aft with no rotor interference, even in forward flight mode and cruise altitudes with the rotors facing forward. Both the Army and the Marines are suddenly very interested. With the prototype built and flying, there are rumors that Bell is looking to an order book of 2,000 to 4,000 aircraft. Totally nuts, and the future of the US helicopter fleet. And coming in last but not least is our own top secret Dark Star. Now this part is going to be full of rumors, but there is such evidence that this project exists, the sequel to the SR-71 Blackbird. Dubbed a variety of names such as the SR-72 Son of the Blackbird or Dark Star, this hypersonic spy, attack and plane is truly the fastest manned object in the sky. Able to reach speeds of up to Mach 6 and fire hypersonic missiles that could reach Mach 20, this would put America's dominance on the map. And the best part? It's probably already flying. It was originally conceived to be a drone aircraft to be redeployed where spy satellites couldn't reach in time. The development has reached the point where the prototype has been built. Aircraft manufacturer Lockheed Martin recently tweeted about the famed SR-71 Blackbird being the fastest acknowledged crewed air-breathing jet aircraft. As first noted in the war zone, this tweet could be a subtle reference to the SR-72 being much faster and already flying, the long-rumored hypersonic successor to this Blackbird. And then in November 2018, Lockheed Martin stated that a prototype of the SR-72 was scheduled to fly at least by 2025, with entry into service in the mid-2030s, meaning that when we get to our hypothetical 2040 era, it's already going to be flying for 10 years. With this in mind, it looks like that the future of America's Air Force is clear and bright, and nothing else in the sky will claim their dominance. Well, apart from those tic-tac UFOs and black triangles with anti-gravity technology built by the Nazis. But be sure to subscribe when we break down the most insane UFO spots on our next Found and Explained video.
It can be tough to keep producing so much aviation content that I love to take naps whenever I can, and I'm so thankful for Manta Sleep for jumping in to help me do this.
This here is Harry Huaker, the chief designer behind the development of the legendary F-16. And this is definitely not the F-16 as we know it. In one of the interviews, he said, "If I had known that the F-16 was going to be used primarily as a ground attack aircraft, I would have designed it differently." And he did. This is the story of the better, actually, the best F-16 design that was superior in every way. And also why the Air Force never chose it. The F-16 is undoubtedly one of the best multi-role fighters in the world. Proven time and time again in various conflicts, it sets the standards for what a multi-role fighter should perform like. But believe it or not, the F-16 was not actually designed as such, it was designed to just be a fighter jet at first. Let's go back in time, shall we? In 1965, the US Air Force needed a new fighter jet. The current theory was that jets were getting bigger and better, and combat would be settled by missiles to missiles exchanges. And thus, the FX program was started to come up with the next jet. But there was one problem: Vietnam. The military found that the heavier and more advanced US aircraft were failing to match in close-range combat against the Soviet-designed creations, and thus the FX direction was flawed. But don't worry, enter the Fighter Mafia. They were a group of US engineers and officers who would influence the development of next-generation fighter aircraft for the US Air Force. And they came up with something called the John Boyd's Energy Maneuverability Theory. Now, that's a big mouthful, but it was a theory that relates to thrust, weight, aerodynamic drag, wing area, and other flight characteristics of an aircraft into a quantitative model. This would allow combat capabilities of various aircraft or prospective design trade-offs to be predicted and compared against each other. So theoretically, you could design the perfect jet, and that's what the Fighter Mafia set out to do. Their studies indicated that excessive weight would have severely debilitating consequences on the maneuverability of aircraft, a big fat contradiction to the current military doctrine, the FX, of larger and more powerful Air Force jets that were designed to fire those missiles over the horizon. So by 1973, the Air Force was forced to complement its new jet program with an additional, extremely agile light fighter that would supplement the much larger FX fighter in air superiority. But then just a year later, the program changed yet again from a lightweight fighter to an air combat fighter program, with a focus of multi-role capability in the spotlight, and it would no longer be a classic fighter jet. There were two different prototypes in the race to become this new light fighter, the YF-16 winning against the YF-17 because of the better maneuverability and the lower operating cost due to the Pratt & Whitney F100 engine being the same as the winner of the FX program, the McDonnell Douglas F-15. Now keep in mind, because this guy's going to come back later. But the creators of the YF-16, General Dynamics, looked at their award-winning design and thought, how could they make it better? They started working on another proposition that would be more suitable for a larger multi-role aircraft for the FX program or its eventual successor. After all, the YF-16 was never actually really designed for multi-role capability. Many options were considered, like the F-16 with forward-swept wings or the F-16 with canards, but in the end, a cranked delta wing was the way to go. And that is how we got the F-16 extra large. Hey, don't forget we've got a Discord. There's a link down and below where you can come and chat to everybody at the end of the video. This video would have not been possible without the Patreons. I wanted to thank them so much. We've got a link to Patreon there where you can see videos early just like this one and see some behind the scenes content. Thanks so much for all of the people that support me on this channel, and I really do actually genuinely appreciate that. So thanks so much. And lastly, I'll say we've actually got a merch store, so if you want to jump on there and check out some merch to support the channel, there's a link down in the description. The F-16 was, and still is, a very small aircraft compared to other 4th gen fighters of the era, and thus the fuel capacity wasn't impressive to begin with. But after the program requirements changed, the F-16 was some 25% heavier than the YF-16, with all of the same thrust provided by the F100 engine. This meant that the use of fuel tanks was mandatory due to a limited range. So a team led by Harry Hillaker sat down to fix these flaws and came up with the SCAMP project, or Supersonic Cruise and Maneuver Prototype. This jet would keep as many parts as possible from the original F-16, but improve its performance significantly. Firstly, they changed the whole wing design to the famous, at the time, European configuration. Horizontal stabilizers were removed, and instead a cranked or double delta wing was chosen after the team tested various variants in wind tunnels with more than double the size of the original. This wing design was already popular with the Saab Draken and offered much better lift performance and 65% more fuel capacity than the original F-16. Ventral fins on the lower fuselage were also removed, and the fuselage itself was elongated by around 1.24 meters, or that's 10%. Weapon mounting points were changed to further minimize drag, so in air-to-air scenarios, 4 half-recessed AMRAAMs would be paired with 2 wingtip sidewinders. An air-to-ground configuration would have either larger bombs on 4 pylons or up to 16 smaller bombs in a checkerboard style for maximized carnage. And this is a game changer, because you see, in combat, a regular F-16 would need another jet to escort it into the theater. But the F-16XL could carry enough armament for both self-defense and to perform the strike missions, fixing another flaw. The wing design of the XL consisted of 2 blended wing surfaces, a first section that was swept back by around 70 degrees and optimized for supersonic speeds, and the second was swept at around 50 degrees, helping the low speed performance and landings. This wing design was also present on supersonic airliners like the Concorde or the 2144, which needed both high supersonic and subsonic performance. In total, the wings gave the F-16XL 25% increase in lift-to-drag ratio and 50% increase in range due to the larger fuel capacity. But all of this would come with an additional 50% increase in payload capacity as well. By God, this jet is starting to sound incredible. The F-16XL was capable of just a bit under the Mach 1 cruise speed, but even achieved super cruise or supersonic speed without the use of an afterburner. Pretty darn amazing. So gang, sitting there at home, all in all, this jet is very clearly superior than the original F-16. So what the hell happened? And why don't we see it in service today? Firstly, the Air Force was pretty much on board and massively impressed by the work done so far. The Air Force gave General Dynamics the green light for 2 prototypes, a single and 2-seater F-16XL in the early 80s and 1981. At the same time, the US Air Force started a new program under the name of Enhanced Tactical Fighter to replace the F-111 Aardvark with a new strike fighter. That was the exact chance that General Dynamics was waiting for, and this time, they were ready. The F-16XL had its first flight just a year later, and after an impressive performance in comparison to the base F-16 variant, General Dynamics decided to enter the competition with the XL as their bid. There was just this one little teeny tiny issue. Their main idea was to improve over the base F-16 design and not fulfill certain requirements of the program. Oh, and the fact that the competition was none other than a derivative of the famous F-15. Oh no. Although the XL jet was much more suited for ground attack missions in comparison to the original F-16, it was still a far cry from the ultimate 4th gen aircraft, the F-15. By now, the F-15E had a higher maximized speed, a bigger range, and better combat radius, higher flight ceiling, and most importantly, a much bigger payload capacity. But even all of these weren't the deciding factors. The F-15E required only minor changes to the original F-15B, whilst the F-16XL was almost a completely different aircraft by this point. Also, the F-15E was a twin-engine aircraft, and with its missions being deep strikes behind enemy lines, survivability was one of the key factors for this new strike fighter. Political support, along with the lack of funds for both aircraft at the time, and because at the same time the ATF program, the B-1, B-2 and several other big projects were being funded, the F-15E was chosen as the economical winner and entered production. The F-16XL was an amazing plane design, but simply at the wrong time due to financial constraints. The Air Force couldn't put both the F-16XL and the F-16 into service, and plus the jet couldn't really compete against the best in class, the F-15. But this wasn't the end of this platform. In 1988, both prototypes were transferred to NASA to test the supersonic laminar airflow for the high-speed civil transport project. And they were tested throughout the years successfully, but the funding was eventually cut in 1999, due to Boeing losing interest in the concept. Nevertheless, it helped in developing supercruisability for future aircraft, and during the testing of the F-16XL, it achieved speeds up to Mach 1.1 without using the afterburner. In 2007, the F-16XL was briefly removed out of storage because Boeing and NASA wanted to further test the platform with the US Air Force's experiences on the F-16 throughout the years. But the tests were again suspended by 2009, and the F-16XL has remained dormant ever since. But this project actually left a mark, proving that this wing design was optimized for a 4th generation multi-role aircraft, and today most of the European fighters follow this design, like the Gripen, Rafale, and the Eurofighter. The F-16XL remains one of those "God, I wish this actually entered service" aircraft, and a great addition to the channel. You could only imagine what the American Air Force would be like had this aircraft been built and put to work, being a very capable aircraft that may have even superseded the F-16 itself and become the international best hit that General Dynamics needed.
Meanwhile, the F-15 proved to be a great choice, and the F-16 proved itself in combat, so I guess at the end of the day, there was a happy ending for this story. Just the bigger cousin never got to see the action. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. The future of helicopter transport is here, with comically large rotors and... wait, hold on. Is this a plane or a helicopter? Well, actually, my friends, this is called a coaxial helicopter, and being as fast as an aeroplane is just the beginning. It's far more stable, can carry more, and is nearly invisible on radar. And it's the latest specialty dish from the kitchen of legendary Sikorsky and Boeing, with a chef kiss dash from Lockheed Martin. And it's so good that it went head to head against Bell's V-22 2.0 for the replacement of the legendary Black Hawk. But despite ticking all of the boxes with celebrity parents, it failed to win the hearts and minds of the US military. This leaves us asking, is this aircraft a strong competitor for the future of the Army and the Marine Corps, or just another museum piece of a what-if world? Let's find those answers, spin up the rotors, and climb aboard the SB-1 Defiant. Why was the SB-1 such a cutting-edge aircraft? Regular helicopter design suffers from two fatal flaws: slow and unstable. With a speed of around 350 to 400 kilometers per hour, the fastest helicopters in the world are slower than pretty much any aeroplane. On the other hand, a helicopter requires a tail rotor because while spinning, the main rotor creates a counterforce pushing the fuselage in the other direction, and that the tail rotor is needed to counter that force and allow for stability in flight. You lose the tail rotor, you're spinning uncontrollably and falling down hard. The Soviet Kharmov Bureau were the first to solve this problem with coaxial rotor designs on their helicopters. By having a second rotor spinning in the opposite direction on top, you eliminate the force pushing against the fuselage, and as a bonus, you also have slightly more lift. This design also removes the tail rotor out of the equation and makes the aircraft much safer and much more maneuverable. That's imbalance fixed, but the issue of speed persists. The British have tried with their Rotodyne, as well as the Soviets with their Kar-22, to incorporate both rotors and engines that would push the aircraft forward, breaking that speed barrier. But their solution was inefficient, complicated, and still not fast enough. However, in the late 1970s, Sikorsky had an idea that would solve both of these issues, and that idea came to life as the XH-59. By combining coaxial rotor design with additional jet engines, one could get an extremely fast but also stable and safe aircraft, and this is exactly what Sikorsky did. Powered by one turboshaft engine for the rotors and two additional turbojets, the XH-59, also known as the S-69, could reach the speed of up to 487 km per hour. It was stable in flight, and in case of engine failure, it could still use its coaxial rotors to land safely. But even though they had solved two problems, the result had created a third. 3 engines, out of which 2 were turbojets, would guzzle fuel very fast, and the range was then very limited on a helicopter of small dimensions. There wasn't any room to add a bigger fuel tank. Therefore, the project was put in a drawer and left to gather dust for a long time, nearly 30 years to be exact. But then, the US Army came knocking and said, "We want a new helicopter, and we want a lot of them." And yes, you know the engineers had dollar signs in their eyes and pulled out their favorite money-making design. The US government had started something called the Future Vertical Lift Program. The FVL program would be the biggest contract issued by the US Army and the Marines in the last 50 years. Its goal was to create a series of new helicopters which were going to perform both combat, transport, and recce, reconnaissance roles, all whilst sharing as many components as possible. As part of that program, the military was also intending to retire the Leopard itself, the
their UH-60 Black Hawk and replace it with this new aircraft. The military thus turned to two of the very best helicopter manufacturers in the States, Bell with their V-280 Valor concept, and Sikorsky, now under the Lockheed management paired with Boeing, to create this new state-of-the-art helicopter. Sikorsky Boeing brought to the table the SB-1 Defiant, and while they claimed it to be a completely original design, we know that it's pretty much based off the S-69 from the 70s and their subsequent X-2 prototype, although there are some major changes. The size of the aircraft is not much larger than the Black Hawk, although it is powered by two 5,000 HP engines, giving it some 50% more power than the Black Hawk. The coaxial rotor design also removes the need for the tail rotor, but there is now a pusher propeller right there, giving the helicopter a much higher maximum speed. This propeller is powered by the same engines powering the main rotors, the Honeywell T-55s, the same ones that were used on the Chinook. And not to spoil anything, these engines were actually just a temporary solution, but I'll get to that in a second. Looking inside, we can see that the fuselage is more spacious than the Black Hawk and therefore much more optimized as a medevac or troop carrier. The SB-1 also had fly-by-wire controls and a very modern cockpit with large MFDs and a crew of 4, a pilot, a co-pilot, and 2 gunners. The design itself resembles an aeroplane's much more than a helicopter, with a streamlined fuselage and large horizontal control surfaces and movable tails acting as rudders. Flash forward to 2019, the SB-1 took to the skies for the first time, and it was actually very good. Dozens of tests were carried out, including the emergency scenario where one engine was shut down and the helicopter performed with flying colors, showing great maneuverability, safety, and performing well even in low altitude tests. It had a maximum speed of 465 km per hour, which was the minimum program requirements for the Army. But it wasn't just the Army that was buying this new helicopter, but the Marines as well. And these gung-ho soldiers brought to the table some eye-watering requirements of their own. And wouldn't you know it, it was range again. Throughout this video, I've said that the SB-1's design fixed the flaws of the regular helicopter, but there was actually another solution: a tilt-rotor helicopter. This was a design that was well studied and already existed, and we even had the V-22 Osprey flying in the skies by none other than rival Bell. And it was exactly this design that they brought to the program, the V-280 Valor. It was pretty much a V-22 2.0, so to speak. Learning from all the hardships and problems with the V-22, which had developed a reputation as a rather unsafe aircraft, they made this new version much better, easily breaking the 500 km per hour barrier and bringing the range to match, surpassing the requirements set even by those Marines, which was double that of the Army. The range requirements that the SB-1 struggled with. The Valor would have a cruising speed of 280 knots or 520 km per hour, and hence the name V-280, and this falls right into both the Army and the US Marine Corps' minimal requirements, but its top speed is around 550 km an hour when you actually push it to the metal that meets even the most ambitious design requirements of the Marines. Sikorsky and Boeing were not going to take this lying down and were very quick to respond to these results with their own improved version of the SB-1, now called the Defiant X. They explained that these engines that they had inside the aircraft, the old T-55 ones from the Chinook, were not the ones to be used in the final design, and that the new engines on the way would give an additional 50% to both the range and the maximum speed. They would also take the time to make another change in the fuselage, incorporate hidden exhausts like on the RAH-66, lowering the thermal signature, and a more angled body to somewhat reduce its radar cross-section. The landing gear was also changed to a standard tricycle scheme, however that vertical fin wheel was kept probably as an extra precaution as to not damage the fin during landing in bad weather conditions. They even overhauled the interior, getting some new flight controls from Collins Aerospace, including a brand new state-of-the-art Paragon computer, which is going to be used on many future aircraft programs. Alas, it seemed to be all for naught. The aircraft might have ticked all the boxes, but the SB-1 looked lackluster next to the Valor. The Army and Marines decided that they had found their future helicopter. But why? Why did the military choose it? The answer is actually quite simple. There is a ready solution to the V-280, unlike a possible future solution with the SB-1. The V-280 was the future today with its current engines and didn't need any new technology or engineering that were on the horizon for the SB-1, and thus they won the contract. Sikorsky and Boeing protested this decision, but they were rejected by the Government Accountability Office. And it's rather funny when you think about it that Sikorsky fell into the classic Soviet futuristic Project Death Spiral, where an ingenious solution is made, but due to the engines not being ready in time, the project as a whole falls into a heap. So is the SB-1 going to become a museum piece, or is there still some hope left for the project? As we mentioned, the FLV is a huge program and it branches into many different projects. That's right, it's time for round 2. And believe it or not, the two competitors in the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft, or FARA, are Bell and Sikorsky. Sikorsky Boeing's proposal is under the name of Radar X, a very fancy design, but it is very similar to the same design as the Defiant. Especially interesting for a combat aircraft that needs survivability as one of its important factors, something that the SB-1 shines at. Bell, of course, is coming to the table with a proposal called the Invictus. Jesus, where are they coming up with these names? Like we're in some sort of supplement store. The Invictus protein with a new 20% better formula for extra gains. Jokes aside, Invictus follows the same old helicopter design with a tail rotor and might prove inferior this time to the SB-1 derivative Radar. So there is hope that the Sikorsky Boeing might get a large piece of that sweet taxpayer's cake. The SB-1 design is actually much more suitable for a smaller type of aircraft and can't really be upscaled much more. And this is another reason why its transport role might have not been the optimal one, but maybe a combat variant is the real future of this program. And honestly, I really wish I had one. I just think it's neat. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you want to see a story on the V-280 Valor or out supplement named heroes for future combat aircraft. Until then, enjoy your week and I'll see you in the next one. The UH-60 Black Hawk is probably one of the most recognizable and most popular transport helicopters of all time. A pure workhorse, a sheer icon of the US military that has been the backbone of all branches of the armed forces for decades now. And the time has finally come to find a replacement. In one of the largest and most lucrative deals of the 21st century, Sikorsky Boeing and Bell Lockheed duos competed for the future of transport aviation, and today we're going to be talking all about the winner. Let's deep dive and answer the burning question: is this the true successor to the Black Hawk, the mantle of carrying the US war machine forward, and why, apparently, it absolutely demolishes its rival Miracle helicopter? This is the V-280 Valor. If the US military was a movie, the F-22 Raptor would be the hotshot movie star, the B-21 Raider would be the wisecracking sidekick, like from a Michael Bay movie, and the Blackbird would be the grizzly veteran that has won too many awards. But nobody ever pays that much attention to the extras in the background. The guys behind the scenes actually making one of the largest militaries in history work. We're talking about the jack of all trades and the master of logistics, the humble Black Hawk. Over 5,000 Black Hawks have been made since the 1970s, in almost as many variants, from utility to medevac to naval rescue, special forces, etc., 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 to provide transport for all branches of the military and any kind of personnel. But as we just said, the Black Hawk had its first flight exactly 50 years ago, and that makes it old. But it's not just old that's the issue at hand. I mean, we have the F-15 or the AH-64 in service, which are around 50-ish years old designs already, and they're fine. So what exactly is the problem with the Black Hawk? One of the biggest limitations for a long time when it comes to helicopters has been speed and range. And this for ages has bothered the Marines, who have been the de facto main global quick deployment force of the United States even back during the Cold War. So they want something new and cool, and that's how we got the infamous V-22 Osprey, a tilt-rotor aircraft capable of double the normal helicopter speed and a huge combat radius compared to its predecessors, and it was a total game changer. Except that it was not. The V-22 Osprey proved to have a superior performance to the Black Hawk because that's what it was all about at the time, performance. However, it has been plagued with issues, namely maintenance, and it has gained a notorious reputation being an unsafe aircraft. Of course, things have changed over the years, and the V-22 isn't as unreliable as the media wants you to believe, but the tilt-rotor concept has proved to be unsuitable at the time for mass use, and it was limited to a special single aircraft. But now, things have changed. The Future Vertical Lift program was started back in 2009 when an initiative by the Secretary of Defense placed all vertical lift development projects and ideas under one umbrella. Operations in the Middle East, such as Enduring Freedom, highlighted the issues with rotor-based aircraft. So the military decided to start a long-term program intended to find a replacement for all kinds of helicopters in the future, a one-fits-all solution. Whilst there were many initial designs thrown into the mix, the program led to the development of two final prototypes, one which we've already covered on the channel, the SB-1 Defiant. And the other one is our hero of the story today, the Bell V-280 Valor. One of the key design issues with the V-22 Osprey was related to both the engine and rotor propeller design. The rotors were certainly large enough when the Osprey was in flight mode, where they played a standard propeller role, but during takeoff and landing, they were simply not big enough, and the engines were pushed to their limits every time the aircraft tried to get into the sky. The second issue was a little bit nasty. Because the engine nacelles would rotate during takeoff and landing, the jet stream would hit the ground, not allowing side doors to be used for disembarking, meaning everybody had to use the rear ramp. And since the Marines operated this aircraft, it was often used on aircraft carriers where said jet stream would damage the deck, so portable heat shields had to be used for the V-22. The third issue was that the V-22 couldn't take off or land on only one engine, and in case of any issues, it has to turn off and then restart the engines, hoping that that busted one would restart to work for a safe landing. Now you might be asking yourself, why am I blabbering on so much about the Osprey? Well, you see, the Valor fixed all of these issues, every single one of them, and that makes it extremely prospective as the future aircraft for the US military. Although the V-22 had its issues, its speed and range performance was impressive from day one, and it proved to be an irreplaceable asset during its operational service. Up until now. The Bell V-28 Valor's name comes from one of the key requirements of the Future Vertical Lift program, a speed of at least 280 knots or 519 kilometers. And compared to the Black Hawk's 152 knots or the Chinook's 170 knots, this is a huge difference. Hell, even the Apache's maximum speed is 158 knots, and yes, the Chinook is faster than the Apache, so have fun with all of that information. The V-280 solved all of the aforementioned issues with some key design changes. The nacelles with the engines were not rotating in flight, only the rotor's propellers rotated during takeoff or landing. The rotors themselves are only a bit shorter compared to the V-22, namely 10.7 versus 12 meters. However, the V-22 is almost double the weight of the V-280. So even though it produces slightly less lift, it's much lighter to fly. Impressed with these two designs, the military moved forward with a prototype phase, And in 2017, the V-280 had its first flight. Reaching up to the sky, powered by two General Electric T-64 engines, this aircraft had an output of around 8,600 horsepower, which is the same as the CH-53 Super Stallion and Sea Stallion respectively. And look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The fuselage design is also very much alike to the Black Hawk, with a similar layout and two side sliding doors for troops to enter and exit the aircraft. It's operated by two pilots and has two crew chiefs on side-mounted weapons. It can carry 14 troops compared to 11 on a Black Hawk and has a maximum combat range of 1,480 kilometers, compared to the 590 on a Black Hawk, which is quite impressive. We're talking 3 times the range. The V-280 also features an easily recognizable V-tail with a combination of rudders and elevators, called ruddervators for better maneuverability in flight, and of course large control surfaces on the main wing. So what do you do with all this power and maneuverability? Well, below the fuselage there are two cargo hooks allowing the Valor to carry a M777 howitzer whilst flying over 150 knots. This impressive performance got the final tick from the US military and it was authorized to enter serial production. They decided to go with the very same engine that was used on the Osprey, the Rolls-Royce AE1107. A derivative variant would have the designation AE1107F and would give the Valor over 14,000 horsepower. That's 1,000 horsepower per soldier carried. And it's also an engine that Bell is already very familiar with, and it's ready to be mass produced. This means easier maintenance and a cheaper production. Now this all sounds really fantastic, but is this design really that much more superior to the SB-1 Defiant? When the military was looking for a replacement for the Black Hawk, the SB-1 seems to fit the bill perfectly. It has a similar layout and design with a top rotor, with only the additional rear pusher propeller to give it that massive speed boost. It's a design which Sikorsky has played with for years prior to this program, and it's been proven to be quite a good configuration for both an attack and utility helicopter. Because remember, the Future Vertical Lift program was not only about transport helicopters, something that the Valor excels at, but also a whole new generation of aircraft. The issue with the SB-1 actually came down to the engines. The first flight occurred only in 2019, and from day one the SB-1 was underpowered. Using engines from the Chinook, it only managed to achieve a maximum speed of 250 knots, meeting the Army minimum requirements, but not even the minimal Navy or Marine requirements. Meanwhile, in January of 2019, our hero, the V-280, easily passed the 280 knot mark during testing, and in December of 2020, it even achieved a speed of 305 knots or 560 kilometers per hour. Sikorsky scrambled to introduce new engines for the SB-1 that promised a 60% increase in both speed and range, but the military was faced with a simple choice. An already proven and tested design passing all the requirements set, or something that only could potentially reach their goals if all of the stars aligned. The choice was actually quite easy to make, and in 2022, the V-280 was actually chosen as the future helicopter of the US military. And I cannot stress how big of a decision this was. Imagine sitting at your desk at work and an order comes in for a new utility helicopter of around, let's just say, 2,000 to 4,000 aircraft, which is absolutely bonkers and would secure Bell for decades to come. We're talking World War II order numbers. Let me remind you, over 5,000 Black Hawks were produced throughout the years. So this is probably the biggest cash cow that we've ever seen in the world of aviation since the 1940s. On the other hand, the V-280 isn't exactly a silver bullet, and there are still challenges presenting themselves in everyday use. Compared to the Black Hawk, the V-280 is rather massive. Even though the fuselage length is somewhat similar, the overall width of the V-280 is 10 meters more than that of the Black Hawk. And this becomes a big issue when you have to land this aircraft in, say, urban areas or somewhere in a forest.
This means it's much less flexible to be used for special forces, and on a crowded aircraft carrier deck you need to make more room for it. On the other hand, the speed is perfect for medevac and rescue missions. There is a term in the first responder world called the golden hour. This is the first hour after an injury has occurred, and if the individual can be transported to a professional medical care team, say within this hour, the chances of survival are way higher than past this time frame. The V280 speed allows for these quick evacuations, but the LZ limitations might affect that. But in general, the V280 is the perfect helicopter for the Navy and the Marines, namely island hopping, carrier operations, and quick deployment and rescue. But the question remains, is the era of the Black Hawk really over, or is there still a special need for a special aircraft that can operate where no one else can? Can the Black Hawk become the B-52 of the US rotor forces? Well, I guess only time will tell. Now, if you love this video, it turns out that the Russians actually built their own tilt rotor version of this aircraft, and we have a video all about it on the channel that you can watch right now. And this version was an attack version. Modern militaries don't make sense anymore. Well, not as we know them. Let me explain. Gone are the pilots and their large fighter aircraft, and in their place are specialized systems that operate without rest and are far cheaper. And also gone are the dinosaur defense contractors who take billions of dollars to produce a single machine that's out of date and expensive to operate. The future belongs to autonomous defense systems that have individual solutions for each threat, and they're produced by shiny tech companies that innovate and move far faster than any Congress program. Solutions like stealth jets that are invisible to radar, swarming drones that find their own targets, and even loitering weapons that can fly over 24 hours without a break. This is the future of defense, and how in the last 5 years UAE-based technology group Edge has changed the game. Now, I can hear a lot of you in the comments going, what do you mean that modern militaries don't make sense anymore? How does an aircraft carrier turning up at your door no longer a viable option? Well, in the words of the chairman of the Edge Group, it's simple economics.
If you're dealing with a heavy swarm of drones that are cheap, yes, you might have a missile that costs you $500,000 that you try to shoot it. How many missiles can you keep shooting at a drone that costs $5,000? Not a lot. So you need a very different set of defenses to deal with that kind of a threat.
We can even take this to the extreme. The cost of a F-22 Raptor is around $150 million per jet, but you also need the pilot, supporting staff and logistics, and you can't risk just flying it without backup. But if a country can deploy a drone aircraft to combat it for less than the price of all that, which is obviously very possible, then it's a simple war of attrition. But let's go more into that economy of scale. The most expensive part of any military operation is arguably said personnel. Pilots are highly trained and can take decades to get the necessary skills to go toe-to-toe with their rivals and to defend successfully their country's airspace. Simply put, you don't want to lose pilots. Drone aircraft, thus, are the way to go. No pilots, no problem. And lastly, we've seen that wars in the last 5 years have changed completely.
One thing that is very obvious that's been happening for a while is the non-traditional weapons. Meaning in the past, if there are wars between certain countries of a certain size, you'll have large ballistic missiles and you'll have large planes. Now there are small UAVs doing a lot of damage. Now there are hobbyist UAVs that are just dropping grenade bombs to cause a lot of damage. They might not be very accurate products, but they still cause damage. Where these air defense were not really built for them. This is a very different war than wars that happened 10 years ago.
So if it's not battleships and fighter jets, then what is the future of defense? It's all about systems. For example, Edge Group recently revealed their new stealth platform, the Janai or Desert Ghost, which is more cutting edge than any other drones in operation and whose specifications are top secret. Technology that was once held in Area 51 is now available where needed in the world without politics getting in the way. And speaking of aircraft, for air-to-ground capability, we also have the Reach series. This aircraft is a fixed-wing drone that can carry a payload of up to 120 kilograms. It can fly to an altitude of 19,000 feet at a cruising speed of 80 knots up to a communications range of 200 kilometers, although you can put in satellite communications to have an unlimited range. With its reusable functionality and 24 hours endurance, it can loiter in the air until it's needed. But then of course we have logistics like the Air Truck, a fully remote controlled drone helicopter that can carry up to 500 kilograms of a speed of 140 kilometers per hour. It has a surface ceiling of 3,000 meters and a range of 360 kilometers, meaning that its supply range is massively impressive compared to the operations that would normally require a proper helicopter. It can even be pre-programmed to follow a set course with troops in the field requesting resupply without having to engage air support. But these aircraft are just on theme for the rise of the new two types of warfare that we're seeing in this modern age: loitering ammunitions and swarming drones. In the past, we've seen an aircraft fly off the border of a nation being refueled by a tanker and waiting for its order to enter into action. This can now be done by a drone system that never needs to sleep or be replaced for even up to 24 hours.
Loitering ammunition, we're definitely in the top 3 largest players in loitering ammunition globally in size.
The second system is AI swarming technology. Because these drones are significantly cheaper than normal aircraft, there is the ability to deploy them in a big way and let them find their own targets, thanks to intelligence operations. And I mean BIG. There are 32 drones on a truck container that can all be launched within 60 seconds. Carrying a payload of up to 2 kilograms, these ground-launched drones can reach a maximum altitude of 3,000 feet and are suitable for recon and offensive missions, operating with an endurance of up to 30 minutes. Which is just totally insane. And there's a huge advantage to this type of technology development pathway, and that's speed. Instead of seeing the likes of Boeing and Lockheed, bloated defense contractors who take decades to produce a new type of machine, we're now seeing tech companies entering the space and able to be much more versatile and flexible.
We don't see ourselves as a defense contractor. We are an advanced technology company that happens to be in the defense sector, which means the DNA is about agility, speed, being very proactive and very pragmatic in how we really build our products. What we can get off the shelf, let's get off the shelf. What we need to customize, let's customize. And I think that is what's driving how fast we're really building our products and how agile we're building our products. That's, I think, where we are much more agile than maybe many of the dinosaur large conglomerates in that regard.
They can move faster and fill the defense gaps in a countries better than the dinosaurs of the past, meaning it can take them less than 12 months to go from mock-up to a deployable solution on the battlefield, which is actually what Edge did with the Reach.
Like when we announced Reach S, 12 months, 18 months ago, it was a plastic mock-up sitting on a shop floor, and people said, yeah, everyone can create a mock-up. Today, that plane is already dropping weapons, doing full flight tests, and actually going to deliver to client next year. We already have 100 plane order announced yesterday from the client. It's a significant order.
Now, I know your heads are spinning at this coming of the age of technology, but I assure you there are some serious ramifications that still need to be considered. Now, there are some interesting issues with the way that this technology is going, and the main one is the lack of a pilot, or rather a man in the middle. Not just the risk of being hacked, but also making these drones intelligent.
Cybersecurity on these products shouldn't get hacked because they're autonomous. At the same time, how are they intelligent? They're not just a flying body with a weapon, but how can they really coordinate much more sophisticated missions, much more sophisticated programs that can really help the user execute much more accurately and at speed. They have swarm capabilities, they have cross-communication capabilities, they have a lot of AI in them in this regard. That's where we're spending our time. They need to become much more intelligent so they can become precise.
Yep.
They can reduce collateral damage in that regard. They can deal with the situation on the fly and deal with different scenarios. So we're investing a lot on swarm platforms, we're investing a lot on intelligence platforms, and we're making them universal blocks. So I can put them on platform A, but very easily move them to platform B, C, and D.
Now, whilst I've talked about the military applications pretty significantly, many of these products can also be used in the civil industry, such as farming.
We're also taking these technologies and applying them in other civil areas through other organizations in the ecosystem in that regard. Maybe in the agriculture industry, where you need the drone to coordinate with the planting seed and that's the agility we have, which a normal defense contractor is unable to do, because they see the restrictive technologies, you can't really move it to civil area. Where we are saying is be very practical.
And let's see Lockheed do that. This video would have not been possible without the help from the Edge Group, who partnered with Found and Explained to help create this video.
And by allowing agile teams to each focus on their part, that's really allowing us to come to market much faster and come to market in a much more robust way. You see it in our loitering ammunition, you see it in our drones in that regard. And today in the drones, I think we are showing that we are a force to be reckoned with.
And if you're interested to see the whole interview with the Edge chairman, then I've put a link down in the description where you can go check it out. It actually is a truly fascinating interview, and there was plenty that I couldn't cover in this short video today. So do go check it out. Of course, it speaks volumes about the future of the defensive industry, recognizing new media such as YouTube and encouraging that startup, fast-paced atmosphere, not just for their products, for their media relations. So I'd like to say thank you very much and encourage you in the comments to go out and see the Edge range and watch this space, because I'm genuinely finding their products really quite incredible. Thank you again so much for watching.